The courtroom was already tense before the woman even walked in. Not because of the case. Not because of the cameras. But because everyone in the room knew exactly who she was. Vanessa Whitmore, a wealthy Beverly Hills real estate millionaire known for luxury parties, expensive interviews, and treating people like they were beneath her. 42 years old, perfect makeup, diamond bracelet shining under the courtroom lights. A woman so used to power that she carried arrogance like perfume. And, standing quietly across from her, was Emily Carter, 26 years old, a waitress. Simple clothes, nervous hands holding a small folder tightly against her chest. No expensive lawyer, no confidence, no power. At first glance, nobody would have imagined these two women belonged in the same room together. But today, they were about to collide in a courtroom where money suddenly meant nothing. And before this hearing ended, someone's entire image would be destroyed forever. The bailiff called the case. Whitmore versus Carter. Vanessa walked confidently toward her table without even looking at Emily. But as Emily slowly pulled out her chair, Vanessa stopped walking, turned toward her, looked her up and down, then laughed, a loud, cruel laugh. "Oh my God," she said. "This is the woman suing me?" Several people immediately looked uncomfortable. Emily lowered her eyes instantly. But Vanessa wasn't finished. "She literally smells like diner grease." A few gasps echoed through the room. Emily's fingers tightened around her folder. The judge hadn't entered yet, which meant Vanessa felt completely free to humiliate her publicly. "You know what's funny?" Vanessa continued loudly. "People like her always want money because they're too lazy to become successful." Emily stayed silent, trying not to cry. Vanessa smirked. "How many tables did you serve before coming here today, sweetheart?" Now, people in the audience were visibly disturbed because this no longer sounded like a normal legal case. It sounded cruel, calculated. Emily slowly opened her folder to organize her papers, and a photograph slipped onto the floor. A little girl, maybe 6 years old, wearing a hospital bracelet, smiling weakly at the camera. Emily quickly grabbed the photo. But someone else had already seen it. An older woman sitting quietly near the back row. And the expression on her face changed instantly, before anyone could react. The courtroom doors opened. "All rise." Judge Eleanor Matthews entered calmly, a woman respected across California for being sharp, fearless, and completely intolerant of arrogance. Everyone stood, except Vanessa, barely bothered. Judge Matthews sat down and immediately sensed tension in the room. Her eyes moved toward Emily, first red eyes, shaking hands, clearly emotional. Then she looked toward Vanessa, relaxed posture, smirking, almost amused. The judge narrowed her eyes slightly. "Is there a problem here?" Nobody answered, but the silence itself told her enough. The hearing began. Vanessa's attorney stood first. "Your Honor, my client is the victim of harassment and defamation after Miss Carter publicly accused her of discriminatory behavior inside La Belle Maison restaurant 3 months ago." Emily instantly shook her head. "That's not what happened." "You'll get your turn," the judge replied calmly. Vanessa smirked again, then whispered something under her breath. Emily heard it. Her face dropped instantly. Judge Matthews noticed. "What did you say, Miss Whitmore?" Vanessa smiled innocently. "I said she seems emotional." The judge stared at her for 2 long seconds, already irritated. Then Emily's attorney stood, and the entire atmosphere shifted. "Your Honor," he began carefully, "this case is not actually about defamation." He paused. "It's about what happened after Miss Whitmore publicly humiliated my client." Vanessa rolled her eyes dramatically. The judge noticed that too. Emily's lawyer continued. "My client worked as a waitress at La Maison for 4 years. No complaints, no disciplinary history. Excellent work record." Emily quietly wiped away a tear. 3 months ago, the lawyer continued, Miss Whitmore entered the restaurant with several guests. During dinner, she became verbally abusive toward Miss Carter. Vanessa laughed softly. "Verbally abusive? Please. Judge Matthews immediately looked up. Miss Whitmore. That single warning silenced her. For a moment, the lawyer continued. My client attempted to remain professional. However, Miss Whitmore mocked her income, appearance, education, and financial status in front of the entire restaurant. People shifted uncomfortably in the audience because after what they'd already witnessed today, it sounded believable. Then came the next detail. And when Miss Carter asked her to stop, the lawyer paused. Miss Whitmore allegedly threw a glass of wine directly into her face. The courtroom exploded with whispers. Vanessa scoffed immediately. Oh, please! It barely touched her. Dead silence. Even her own attorney looked horrified. Because she had accidentally admitted it, Judge Matthews slowly removed her glasses. Are you saying you did throw wine at her? Vanessa crossed her arms. She embarrassed me first. Emily looked shocked. What? Vanessa pointed directly at her. She kept staring at us like some desperate fan. That's not true, Emily replied emotionally. Miss Carter, the judge warned gently, but Vanessa interrupted again. She's obsessed with rich people. That's the real issue here. Emily looked like she'd been slapped. Then suddenly, the older woman from the audience stood up, slowly, carefully. Everyone turned toward her, including when Vanessa saw W. It was. The color drained from her face instantly. Mom, Judge Matthews asked calmly, do you know one of the parties involved? The woman nodded. My name is Margaret Hastings. Emily's face changed. Immediately, she recognized her. Margaret looked toward Emily gently before turning back to the judge. I was inside the restaurant that night. Vanessa instantly whispered something angrily to her attorney. Judge Matthews folded her hands. You witnessed the incident? Yes. And what exactly did you witness? Margaret took a breath, then looked directly at Vanessa. You humiliated that girl. The courtroom froze. Vanessa laughed sarcastically. Oh my God. But nobody else was laughing anymore. Margaret continued quietly. I watched Miss Carter tables professionally for nearly 2 hours. She never disrespected anyone. She paused. But Miss Whitmore kept targeting her. Emily lowered her eyes again, like she was reliving the humiliation. She mocked her clothes first, Margaret continued. Then her education. Then her income. The audience listened silently. And at one point, Margaret said carefully, Miss Whitmore asked her if she had ever considered marrying rich instead of serving rich people. Several people looked disgusted. Even the bailiff looked uncomfortable now. Vanessa. You're acting like I committed murder. Judge Matthews slowly turned toward her. I strongly advise you to stop talking. That finally silenced Vanessa. Then Margaret said something nobody expected. There's more. She slowly reached into her purse and pulled out her phone. Vanessa's face changed immediately. Panic. I recorded part of the incident. The room exploded with whispers. Vanessa stood up instantly. That's illegal. No, the judge replied calmly. Under these circumstances, it may be admissible. Vanessa sat down slowly. Margaret handed the phone to the bailiff, and the audio began playing. Restaurant sounds filled the courtroom. Then Vanessa's voice. You should be grateful people like me even tip you. The room became still. Emily's soft voice followed. Mom, I'm just trying to do my job. Vanessa again. Well, maybe do it better. Then another line. You people always act like victims because your lives failed. Gasps spread through the audience. Emily looked down in humiliation. Then came the final part. A splash. Emily gasping softly. Restaurant chaos. And Vanessa laughing, actually laughing. The recording stopped. Complete silence. Judge Matthews stared at Vanessa coldly. Miss Whitmore, is any part of that recording fabricated? Vanessa crossed her arms defensively. People say things when they're angry. The judge looked stunned. Did you throw wine at her? She provoked me. Daniel Whitmore walked slowly toward the center of the courtroom. And for the first time since this hearing began, Vanessa looked afraid, real fear. Not embarrassment, not irritation, fear. Judge Matthews studied him carefully. And you are? Daniel Whitmore, he replied calmly, former co-owner of Whitmore Luxury Holdings. A wave of whispers spread across the courtroom. Even Emily looked confused. Vanessa immediately stood up. Daniel, what are you doing here? But he ignored her completely. That scared her even more. Judge Matthews folded her hands. Are you connected to this case, Mr. Whitmore? Yes, Your Honor. He reached into a leather folder. And I believe I have information directly related to Miss Whitmore's behavior. Vanessa's attorney looked exhausted now, like his soul had already left his body 20 minutes ago. Your Honor, the attorney sighed. I was not informed this witness would appear, Daniel calmly replied. Neither was I. The room stayed silent. Judge Matthews nodded slowly. Proceed. Daniel looked toward Emily first, and his expression softened immediately. I remember you. Emily looked surprised. You do? Daniel nodded. You served my daughter and me at La Belle Maison last year. Emily looked confused. Daniel continued. My daughter spilled orange juice all over the table. You stayed 30 minutes after your shift helping calm her down. Emily remembered instantly. Oh, Daniel smiled sadly. You were kind. Vanessa rolled her eyes dramatically. Oh my God, are we seriously doing this? Judge Matthews immediately snapped toward her. One more interruption and I will hold you in contempt. Vanessa finally stayed quiet, barely. Daniel then turned serious again. Your Honor, my ex-wife has a long history of publicly humiliating employees. The courtroom reacted immediately. Vanessa shot up again. That is not true. Daniel ignored her. I spent 15 years married to Vanessa. I watched her destroy waiters, assistants, drivers, receptionists, anyone she believed was beneath her. Vanessa looked horrified now, because this was no longer a random waitress accusing her. Now her own ex-husband was exposing her publicly. Daniel slowly opened the folder in his hand. These are internal complaints filed against Miss Whitmore over the last 6 years. Vanessa's attorney closed his eyes. Done. Completely done, Daniel continued. 3 assistants resigned after panic attacks. The courtroom became still. 1 employee reported being forced to clean wine off Miss Whitmore's shoes while she recorded it for social media. Several people looked disgusted, and another employee required therapy after repeated public humiliation. Emily covered her mouth. Even she didn't expect this. Judge Matthews carefully reviewed the documents handed to her. The deeper she read, the colder her face became. Meanwhile, Vanessa looked trapped, like the perfect image she spent years building was collapsing brick by brick. Then Judge Matthews looked up slowly. Miss Whitmore. Her voice was ice cold now. Is any of this false? Vanessa opened her mouth, then closed it again, because, for once, there was nothing left to say. The courtroom silence became unbearable. Then Daniel quietly added one final sentence. The reason I divorced her, he paused, was because I realized she enjoys humiliating vulnerable people. That line hit the courtroom like a bomb. Even Vanessa looked shaken by it, not angry, shaken, because deep down, she knew it was true. Then something happened nobody expected. Emily suddenly stood up. Everyone looked toward her. She wiped tears from her eyes slowly, then looked directly at Vanessa. You know what hurt the most? Vanessa stayed silent. Emily's voice trembled. It wasn't the wine. The room became still again. It wasn't even the insults. Emily swallowed hard. It was the way you looked at me. Vanessa's expression slowly changed. For the first time, she actually listened. Emily continued quietly. Like I wasn't human. A few people in the audience started crying softly. Like because I was poor, I deserved humiliation. Judge Matthews looked emotional now too. Emily held up the small hospital photograph again. My daughter was fighting for her life that night. Her voice cracked completely. And I still went to work because I couldn't afford not to. Dead silence. I was exhausted, scared, broken. Emily looked directly into Vanessa's eyes, and instead of treating me like a person, she paused. You treated me like entertainment." Vanessa looked away immediately. Unable to maintain eye contact anymore, that was the moment the courtroom truly turned against her. Not because she was rich, not because she was rude, but because everyone finally saw the cruelty underneath the money. Judge Matthews slowly removed her glasses again, and this time, her disappointment was visible. "Miss Whitmore," she said carefully, "wealth is not character." Vanessa stared silently at the desk. "You entered this courtroom believing power protected you from accountability." The judge leaned forward. "But this court does not measure human value by income." Nobody moved. Nobody even blinked. Judge Matthews continued. "You mocked a working woman struggling to keep her child alive." Vanessa's eyes slowly filled with tears now. Real tears, not dramatic ones, not fake ones. Because for the first time in years, she was being forced to confront herself. The judge continued. "You humiliated her publicly, assaulted her, then attempted to portray yourself as the victim." Vanessa finally whispered, "I was angry." Judge Matthews immediately replied, "No." The courtroom froze. "You were cruel." That line hit harder than anything else said all day. Vanessa broke completely. She covered her face, crying silently now. But nobody felt sorry for her, because the pain in the room belonged to Emily, not her. Judge Matthews made her ruling. "This court dismisses Miss Whitmore's claims entirely." Vanessa slowly looked up. "In addition," the judge continued, "Miss Carter is awarded damages for emotional distress, workplace humiliation, and assault." A gasp spread through the courtroom. Emily covered her mouth in shock. Tears streamed down her face instantly. But Judge Matthews wasn't finished. Furthermore, she looked directly at Vanessa. "I strongly recommend anger management counseling and mandatory behavioral evaluation." Vanessa stared downward silently. "Destroyed. Publicly. Emotionally, completely." Then came the final moment, as Vanessa stood to leave. She suddenly snapped emotionally at a court officer. "Don't touch me." The officer had barely moved. But Vanessa, overwhelmed and panicking, shoved his arm away aggressively. And that was the final mistake. The courtroom security immediately stepped forward. "Mom, calm down. I said don't touch me." Vanessa pushed the officer again. The courtroom erupted. And within seconds, security escorted Vanessa Whitmore out of the courtroom in front of everyone. The exact same woman who entered the room acting superior was now being removed publicly while cameras flashed outside the doors. And the silence she left behind felt heavier than anything said all day. Emily sat quietly at her table, still crying softly. Judge Matthews looked toward her one last time, then said gently, "Miss Carter." Emily looked up. "You never deserved what happened to you." Emily broke down completely, because sometimes the most powerful thing a broken person can hear is someone finally saying, "You mattered." The courtroom slowly emptied afterward. But nobody forgot what they witnessed that day. Not the arrogance, not the humiliation, and definitely not the moment power finally failed to protect cruelty. Because that day, a rich woman walked into court believing money made her untouchable, and walked out escorted by security, while the waitress she humiliated finally got her dignity back.